Was the Boxcar Racer project with you sort of, the first time that you started writing like outside of Blink and you kind of wanted to flex your songwriting muscles a little bit? Did it kind of start with that project?
Yeah, absolutely, and thanks for bringing that up. When I when I did Boxcar Racer, I definitely wanted to toy around with with much more latitude on the emotional kind of underpinnings of song structures and dynamics, and I toyed around with different influences, more like kind of post-hardcore bands and independent rock bands, and but we only did one record, but it was a really, really great laboratory experiment for me. But I always tell people, Angels and Airwaves is Boxcar Racer. It's just it really, because Boxcar Racer started with me and David Kennedy.
Sure.
And he's in Angels and Airwaves as well. We don't have Travis, and Travis is obviously one of the best drummers on the planet. But that was Angels and Airwaves is Boxcar Racer. It really, for lack of a better description.
Oh, that's interesting. So, actually, if we look at a song like "I Feel So," Travis is actually on that. And there is kind of that rock ballad with that acoustic guitar. So that was just, like you said, just really trying to expand yourself as a songwriter and stuff that maybe just wouldn't have worked with Blink.
Yeah, and I think it's not that Blink, Blink, I didn't know it until I did Boxcar Racer, what it was going to sound like, and I wasn't ready to use Blink as some big, guinea pig for my artistic ambition. I also needed a break, to kind of do my own thing. But after I discovered that kind of sensibility, yeah, a lot of those attributes can totally live within Blink-182. But, we're totally different in that band, like all three of us have vastly different inspirations musically now and back then, as far as, where we grew up, what we listened to, what kind of music we want to even play. And so it makes it difficult for a guy like me that's pretty all over the place with ADD, wanting to test out my own personal limits. It makes me difficult to find a complete voice in Blink. But the cool thing about Blink too is that it allows me to have that sense of eternal youth and rebellion that I grew up on, and I never want to lose that. So it plays a super important role in my life nonetheless.
Oh, that's cool. So in February 2005, Blink took a little bit of a hiatus, and if I understand correctly, you had sort of been working on some of the music that would show up on We Don't Need to Whisper sort of while you were with Blink. So maybe some of this was a little bit Blink inspired. Some of the music that we hear on that first Angels record.
Well, not necessarily. I remember thinking about textures and landscapes. I was trying to redefine my own music that I write at the time, and I remember telling the guys in Blink before we broke up that I was like, "Hey, I think I'm honing in on a sound that I think would be where we need to go. Progressive punk, not so much progressive rock, and I'm all, but I think I'm grabbing some of my favorite pieces of some of my favorite bands. I'm all putting it together with our kind of angst. And I think I'm starting to understand what it should be. And but then we broke up, but I didn't have any songs written. I was just kind of in my head.
I see.
Obsessing about what this stuff looks like glued together. A little piece from the Police, a little piece from U2, a little piece from The Cure, a little piece from Queen, that kind of stuff. And when Angels and Airwaves started, it was really about just jumping in the lake and getting completely wet with trying things out. And I started from scratch, other than conceptualizing, what some of these landscapes and textures felt like or sounded like. But yeah, Whisper doesn't have any songs that were previously written, but I think people think that it did.
Oh, interesting. So so Tom, if we look at a song like "The Adventure," was that a pretty representative kind of a palette for some of these new influences and some of these new ideas you were having?
Absolutely. That would be the flagship Angels and Airwaves song. It's really interesting because that song was basically taking a punk rock song and giving it a certain velocity, an engine that can take it out of the garage and up into the clouds a bit. Lyrically, it was for a friend of mine that was going through a painful divorce, and I remember him telling me that of what it feels like to love somebody so much more than they love you. And I wanted to write a song that picked him up. But I realized halfway through the writing of that song, I was writing it for myself. I was in such a bad spot because I was fighting in the press with my old bandmates, and people were so pissed at me for quitting that band, and I just felt really shitty. I was really trying to redefine who I was. I was like going through a crazy midlife crisis, midlife artist crisis. I wanted to become a better person. I wanted to change who I was. I wanted to change who I was as an artist. And so when The Adventure was being recorded, that was like the first door that was opening to a whole new world. And it was actually really funny because we were getting mixes sent back to us in the email from Florida where they get mixed. And someone broke into my email, hacked into my email, and stole half of the record.
Oh my God.
This kid released The Adventure himself first. So I remember at the time Yahoo was tracking how much is trying to get stolen on the internet, and Angels and Airwaves was the #1 thing.
Oh my God.
At the time, because there's a lot of hype about it, but no one knew what it sounded like.
Yeah.
Well, this kid released The Adventure first, and I think in some circles it lived up to the hype. So it actually was a really, really great thing for us.
That's interesting. By this time, Tom, for the first Angels record, you'd been working with David Kennedy for a while. I mean, obviously, you knew that with this new band, you wanted a second guitar player. You thought maybe that could open up the writing process more, allow you to go to different places musically.
Yeah, David Kennedy is good for a whole host of reasons. One, yes, you've got a different guitar in there, so it allows you to do multiple parts on stage. The second thing would be he allows me to put the guitar down and be a front man.
Yeah, right.
Focus on engaging with the audience, which I think we need a part of, you know. He also is I call him, he's kind of my foundation. He's always so solid in making sure that I take the risks that I want to as a human and as a person and putting myself out there. It's really great to have a guy like that in a band with you where they say, no, you see you, and you don't shy away from it, and I got your back, you know? And so David Kennedy has always been so strong for me in that regard as well. So, and in the writing process, him and I love the exact same kind of music. So every time we're honing in on something, we totally relate.
Oh, that's so cool. And he would sort of push you as a guitar player as well to try different things and maybe experiment with different sounds, you know, kind of delays and echoes and that type of stuff?
Absolutely. He's always easily pushes me into new areas with new bands and trying new things. I kind of hear all my new music from him. He knows a lot more of what's happening than I do. I'm pretty slow to get onto new acts. I kind of want to make sure that all my friends sign off on it first. There's so much of it out there. I need like a filtering mechanism, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Danny Lohner produced that record. You know, it was a pretty interesting choice, you know, doing the Eminem stuff and, you know, Nine Inch Nails and stuff. I mean, what did you think that Danny could bring to the record?
Well, Danny produced, I believe, 1, maybe 2 songs on Whisper. He was, in the sense, he brought a couple elements that really got my mind ticking right away. The first thing he ever did for one of the songs is he added marching into it. And that to me was like a whole new door because I was very obsessed with the idea and the dichotomy of love and war. And so I had this song about, a city, it's called Distraction.
Yeah.
I think it's the second song on the album on Whisper. But it was basically about planes coming in and leveling the city that you're in, but you turn to the girl you love and you say that I will be your distraction. And when he added the marching into that, it just added a gravity that really resonated with me that I've carried through the band ever since.
That's so cool. Moving on to the second record, Tom, I Empire. I mean, a song like Everything's Magic, you know, was such a very cool song, you know, melodic, you know, great picking parts. You know, I mean, are you growing as a songwriter now? Are you becoming more comfortable with kind of who Airwaves are and who you are as a songwriter by this second record?
Yeah, I think by Empire, I'm really honing in on the triumphant kind of sound, the epic kind of melodic ideas, and the crescendo. I start to master the idea of having songs build and build and have a crescendo, and losing a little bit of the atmospheric for a little bit of the rock element on that record. And that's where Angels and Airwaves needed to be, not totally atmospheric, but not totally rock. We want to kind of walk on the fence line between those two planets. And I think on Empire we started doing that.
Gotcha. You bring up a really interesting point, Tom, about writing these these songs that sort of build these epic kind of triumphant kind of arrangements and vocal melodies. I mean, is that something that you really worked on? Because those elements really come out on kind of the Love and the new Love Part 2 record. I mean, there's just so much kind of drama, and they build so beautifully. I mean, did that really take you a while to look at melodies and how to build things to a point and create sort of that drama in a song?
Yeah, absolutely. I would have to say that's one of the things I spent most of my time on, because these days it's really easy to write a good melody. I mean, I remember back, in the early 90s when I was just starting out, there weren't that many rock bands coming up with great melodies, and now it's like 16-year-old kids in a garage band are writing the catchiest songs ever. So for me, it's not about a catchy song anymore. It's about the packaging. Anybody can write a catchy melody. The simplicity of it is usually what works, but the packaging, the song that supports that structure on top of it. If a melody was a building, what's the foundation and the finished materials holding that building up? And that's how I look at the idea of the triumph ingredients in some of the melodies that I write. Is the music is what's making that happen. So when you deliver something that's usually quite simplistic, it's got to be worth delivering in front of a large audience. And obviously I'm pretending the band is much bigger than it is, and that's the goal, And I think it comes across in the records where you kind of hear this and go, wow, these guys aren't a gigantic band, but you can tell they feel like they are,
That's really interesting, and you actually, bring up another great point. You got Matt Wachter in the band for this record. Yeah, I'm sorry, and replacing Ryan, and Matt comes from, one of the bands that I think have that great epic thing together so beautifully, 30 Seconds to Mars, and I know that a lot of your history crosses with those guys, and you've toured with them and stuff, and but I think they're amazing at creating these huge songs. But getting back to Matt, what was it that he brought to Angels that you thought maybe was missing with Ryan?
Well, Matt's a couple different things. Matt brought in a really great personality that meshed instantly with me and David. Instantly. He's one of my favorite human beings on the planet. But he's like that kind of musician that plays things perfectly, and he'll be up at 6 in the morning with the computer making sure. He's so anal that way that he plays it perfectly. So his timing's perfect, his bass playing's perfect, but then he plays piano, and he also is like an electronic wizard. He's all about computers and electronics and engineering. He does Photoshop, graphics. So he comes into the band, he does all these things that we can't do. He opens the computer, he can record our music, he can do logos, he can put together a whole electronic kind of...
Hello?
So Matt can put together a whole electronic kind of little masterpiece in the live show or on the record. He records a lot of the segues in between the songs, those atmospheric tidbits. So he's doing like 10 things that I don't have time or the skill set to do. If you look at Angels and Airwaves, it's a multimedia project. You have the songs, you have all the interludes between songs, you have all the short films, the feature films, the graphics and iconography. The show is put together with these large piano deconstructions and electronic deconstructions. And so Matt comes in and fills all those, wearing multiple hats, and it instantly made the band able to do like 50% more.
Interesting. And Tom, just a couple words on the Neighborhoods record, the new Blink record. Obviously, it must feel good to be back with those guys and kind of doing that. And you're talking about going on the road with them. It's all working for you. You guys are happy with that record, and it said everything you guys wanted to say.
Yeah, the biggest thing that we wanted to say was that we can get back together and make another album. In most bands that break up don't have that tenacity or the endurance to do that. And that to me was the best thing about it. And we're super happy with it. You know, we didn't pressure each other. We took our time and had fun doing it. And it gave us the ability to have some more progressive songs in the set, which gave us the ability to have a more progressive production, which is something I was really excited to have.
Interesting. I mean, you talk about those elements, those progressive elements. I mean, if you look at a song like Up All Night, I mean, there's kind of like sequenced keyboards in there, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of stuff in there, and I was able to bring a lot of those elements in, and it seemed to be something the guys really responded to. You know, not too much of it, but just enough to do some different stuff.
Interesting. You know, I mean, it's really interesting. I mean, you hear this Tom DeLonge character in this band Blink-182, and you hear these songs, a song like Up All Night, and then you hear this, you know, this guy writing for this band called Angels and Airwaves, and you know, the songs are completely different, and yet you know there is that connecting tissue. I mean, in Up All Night, there's sort of like that B section where it has like that big dramatic build up. You know, the way you put your vocal melodies over the sort of the ascending riffs and stuff. I mean, you can tell the same guy did these two things, but yet they're totally different. I mean, does that make any sense to you?
Yeah, you know, and it does, because my melodic sensibility has always been there. And the funny thing is, with Angels and Airways, a lot of times when I use all the guitar effects, I kind of still play the same way I always have. So if you kind of like take a Blink riff and put on a bunch of echo, it sounds like Angels and Airways, but it's still kind of the same kind of simplistic playing. And so, you know, my melodic sensibility is always going to be kind of set in stone. So the way I approach a pre-chorus or a chorus will almost always be, you know, synonymous with the other band. But with Angels and Airways, there's just a lot more latitude for lengths of songs and duration of intros and with latitude of instrumentation.
Really interesting. I mean, you co-produced Neighborhoods with Mark and Travis, and you know you produced the Angels record. I mean, is it a completely different experience, sort of sitting in the producer's chair doing the Blink record as opposed to producing for the Angels record?
Yeah, I mean, because in Angels and Airways we just communicate a different way. I think the strength of Blink is the differences in each member. The strength in Angels and Airways is the alikeness and the common vision. So the communication is always going to be much different from each band. But I think that that's why the bands have their own little bit of magic is because of those differences.
Really interesting. Just a couple more questions here, Tom, and I'm going to let you go. The greatest hits record that Blink released in 2005, I mean, had you guys not gotten together, that was sort of released sort of after you guys kind of broke up. I mean, if that had been the last document of this band, Blink-182, and you looked at sort of that collection of songs on the greatest hits record, I mean, what did it mean to you? I mean, if you look at that as sort of like this, this legacy of this band, Blink-182, I mean, how did it kind of hit you?
Well, I think it showed a kid growing up, just getting through puberty, and he feels like he's a man, but he's not quite a man yet, and what's good about having another Blink record and the band get back together is it's able to show that maturity that was never able to be shown. It's kind of like when you meet a young kid that's like 20 years old and he thinks he's like a total adult, and you're kind of like, well, you don't really know that much yet, And I think that if that was the lasting imprint, it would show that youth, but would never show the maturity. And I think that that's our job now, is to show that maturity.
That's really interesting. And last question here, Tom. I mean, is it difficult? I mean, you tell me now that you're heading off to do the Blink tour, and you just got done with the Angels record and all of those various projects. I mean, is it difficult balancing this embarrassment of riches? I mean, having two very successful bands in terms of being this creative entity that has to work with both of these groups of musicians and sort of being consistently kind of on your A game. I mean, is that a difficult thing to do? Is it challenging?
Yeah, it sure is, and it's I never planned for it to be that way. I didn't think Blink was ever getting back together, so I started Angels and Airways, and that became my life. Then Blink got back together, and no one saw Travis, living through that tragedy of a plane crash.
Yeah.
I don't think if that didn't happen, we would never be a band still. But now I find myself with both these bands, And the good thing is Blink doesn't work too much. You know, we're going to go places where a boat can take us, and that's not that many places in the world. So that gives me plenty of time to do the Angel thing. And me as an individual, you know, I'm made up of that young guy and that kind of maturing guy that wants to pretend he has some life experience under his belt. So it's good to have both of these things.